I'm Marcy Baughman. I'm the Senior Director of Research here at Macmillan Learning. And I was asked to come speak to you today because we want to share with you the principles that we use to, how we use research to support the development of our products. And I'm excited to do it because I think it's not something that we talk a lot about in the publishing industry. Even myself, I'm in a little group that's housed within Macmillan Learning. We're all remote because we're traveling to the universities and we're working directly with the instructors and students to learn how are our products working, what makes them work better for certain cohorts of students, kind of like what Betsy was talking about. We do a lot of disaggregating to look at whether we're serving all groups of students well. We also want to understand how we're working for you as instructors. So are there ways that we can make our programs so that they're more efficient for you, so that they're more interesting for students, so that they're more relevant? And to do that, it takes a lot of different types of research. So I work directly for the Impact Research Division, but today I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the three arms of research that are involved at Macmillan Learning. And those are the Learning Science team, the Analytics team, and the Impact Research team. And we like to say that we're passionate about research here at Macmillan simply because it's all we do. And so my team and I spend all of our time in classrooms either gathering the data directly to understand how our product is working, analyzing it, or reporting it. But in addition, we have teams that are working directly with instructors and students during the development process to better understand what needs do you have that we still need to meet, and how can we meet those needs? Has anybody else done research on these things so that we don't have to rebuild the wheel? We want to understand if you've already done research, for example, on active learning, or I was talking to somebody in the bathroom about grit, right? So if we understand what makes a student have grit and persist, can we build some instructional practices that emphasize that into our product without having to go out, recreate how to measure grit, and then go on and determine how we can actually emphasize that in students? And so the way that we do this is we work with a variety of instructors and students from the start of the development process to the finish of the development process. And so typically when we start, we look at all of the products that we have existing. So some of you guys may have already used products like Flip It Econ or Launchpad or Sapling. And as you know, we still have those products and we're still selling them and you're still using them. But we are always thinking about the next generation of our product. And so what we've done is taken a look at what are some of the things that have worked best for you all, say, in Flip It Econ. And one thing I heard in my research with Flip It Econ is everybody loves the videos. They love the bridge tutorials. They like to have their students look at these things beforehand and engage. Well, if I know that, I'm not going to throw it away as I develop my next product. I'm going to automatically put that into the product, and that is exactly what we do. We then take that and we go out and start interviewing instructors and students and saying, what are you looking for that you haven't seen yet? And a lot of times we don't know what we don't know. I mean, once you accept a job at Macmillan, you're really not an instructor anymore. And so we have to learn from you all, what are you missing? What are you still looking for? And we take that and then we start looking at learning science. So tons of literature reviews. And thankfully I don't do those anymore, but I do read all of the literature reviews that come to us. And we try and understand, has there been research done, for example, on active learning with student response systems that says there are the most effective ways of using student response systems to increase active learning? I do a lot of work with student response systems, particularly iClicker, of course, because Macmillan publishes that. And what I've learned is that when you use student response systems just for taking attendance, there's a wealth of opportunities that you're missing that could increase active learning in the classroom. But if nobody is out there doing the research to understand this, how would you know? You're siloed in your classroom, and you may not have ever heard that some people are now not only using it for polling, but they're using it for heat maps, and they're using it for open-ended questions because they've developed an algorithm that they can go in and quickly look at the open-ended questions and get feedback on the fly. And so these are things that are emerging that if we weren't doing the research, we would never know, we would never be able to build products for, and we would never be able to share it with you. And so hopefully what we do as we continue in this research field is we keep developing products that are staying ahead of the students and staying ahead of what we know that you guys need so that you can meet their students where they're at. When I talk about co-designing learning solutions, this is our learning science team. Some of the questions that we like to ask instructors and students are, what are the key challenges that you're still facing in your classes? And where can we create efficiencies for you? Efficiency has become a really critical buzzword in education research. I know it's always been around, but lately it's around even more. And I think it's speaking to the diverse classrooms that you have, right? So Betsy talks a lot about meeting students where they're at. These are parents, these are people taking care of aging parents themselves. And so instructors are also under the gun to be able to meet the needs of these students who have less time, less money, and sometimes even less bandwidth to be able to come into the classroom and just give full attention. And so we need to help understand how can we help you as an instructor be more efficient, but also how can we help the learning become more efficient for your students? And what does this look like? And so we have students and instructors actually come into our labs, and I suspect some of you guys have actually done this in our Austin lab. But you come in and you spend a couple days and you actually create and map your user journey. And it's a messy process. And I just showed you a quick snapshot of it, but it's literally sticky pads all over the wall. And what they're trying to do is understand over the course of the semester, where are your pain points? And what we hear most frequently is first 2 weeks, absolute pain point. You're trying to get students oriented to class. You're trying to teach them your ways of working. You're trying to help them understand the digital platform, which you guys all know can be a nightmare. And especially when your student is like that one student who's having all of the problems and they keep coming to you after every single class and you cannot figure out what is going wrong. So we're trying to learn that in advance so we can help you avoid it in the future. We had one instructor, Keonda Johnson. We've worked with her for the past 3 semesters, and it was really fulfilling to hear her say that she's never been part of a review process like this before. She certainly hasn't just used Macmillan products, but she's part of this review process because she has a very broad portfolio of students and student needs. And so we want to see what her feedback is and others like her so that we can build tools especially for people like her. Once we understand all of this, we then take this information and we apply it, right? So one of my favorite things that's coming out right now on the Achieve platform, which if you haven't seen it yet, I'm going to talk a little bit about the research we're doing so that you can see this in an applied sense, is the idea that we build in preflection and self-regulation tools. Learning science has already told us this works. What we needed to figure out was, what does it look like? And so we took some of the videos and the bridges from Flip It and we incorporated it into Achieve. And what I'm learning by observing these classrooms is that students respond. If you ask them to watch a video before class and answer a couple of questions, not for credit, just for understanding, and if you don't ask them to read the text, which I know is like mind-blowing, but I mean, in my head it has become mind-blowing because what I hear from students most frequently is, I don't have time to sit down and read a chapter. I don't have time to sit down and look through a physical book. I want it on my phone. I want it in like little specific paragraphs. I don't want to have to read it 30 minutes in a row because I've got to go to practice or I've got to feed my baby, and so I want it in snapshots. And so what we've learned is if you put it in video format and you add a couple of bridge questions, we call it preflection. And the students are able to get this material in snippets at a timely manner that is right for them. And what the instructors are now telling me is that they can use that and make the classroom more active, which is making it more engaging, which now students are saying that they are learning more. And we think that part of the process also of building an effective tool is giving opportunities for learning before, in, and after class. So imagine if you have this preflection, students watch a video, they don't have to read the textbook, and then they come into class and they flip the classroom. So Tony Haskell, I don't think he's here, no. Tony Haskell is one of my favorite instructors to go observe because when I go into his classrooms, the students have already watched the videos. So instead, what he does is show examples, and then the students have to solve some of these examples in class. Then they meet in groups, then they present it to him, and then they're learning. The whole class is extremely interactive. It's fun. I haven't seen a student yet fall asleep or anything like that, and it makes it a much more not only engaging class, it just makes it a much more meaningful class, I think, to the students. And so that's what he does in class. And then after class, he assigns a summative assessment. So we have formative assessments and summative assessments. And when you assign a summative assessment, he understands, did all of this work for this chapter or this unit or whatever he covered? And if it didn't, he takes those little pieces and he goes back and he helps them to understand in the next class what went wrong. And that way he's able to become a more efficient instructor because he's spending time on the things that the students aren't understanding instead of having to cover an entire broad topic by talking really fast like I do in 20 minutes and get it all in. To do this, we partner directly with instructors and students. So I would say about 20% of my job is filling out IRB applications, which you all know what they're like. They are horrible. And so we have to do that because we're partnering directly with actual instructors and students in getting student identifiable information that we can link to platform data, that we can link to surveys, that we can link to student assessment scores. And we're doing that so that we can conduct the most rigorous research possible. We look at studies in development phase so that we can start with descriptive data. We look at things like, you know, do you like the product? Is it easy to use? Because if it's not easy to use, you're never going to use it. And if I find in a descriptive phase of a research study that a product isn't going to use, I'm going to be like, well, wait a minute. Somebody just said it's hard to use. If an instructor is having a hard time using it, what are the 30 students, the 100 students, the 500 students in front of them going to say? And it's really nice to be able to raise that red flag during the development process, not a year out when all of a sudden the Help Center is being bombed with requests and nobody is feeling fulfilled. We also then look at the student data to determine whether it can support learners over the entire course of the semester. So I don't just go in for like 1 week and conduct a few focus groups and then leave. We're collecting data over the entire semester so that we can see what that student process and journey is like, as well as the instructor process and journey. And then we make these results transparent. And I think that might be what is most important here, because I came from a university. I was a measurement specialist at the University of Pittsburgh. And when they recruited me to come over to the publishing world, I was like, yeah, well, I've heard that you guys like only give the good results and you only want to talk about the good things. That doesn't work, right? So we have to be transparent. And I think I was just telling somebody else in the coffee line, like, I don't always have good results to share because not everything is perfect and not every idea that we have is going to work. But I give them the bad so that they can develop something good out of it. And we are transparent with our results, and we share them on our website. And we've got an entire website developed to the Learning Science and Insight team, which I'd encourage you to look at because you can see where we're at right now with all of our products. So let me talk to you a little bit about some studies that we're doing right now on the Achieve platform. I think sometimes it's really helpful to put things in context. So has anybody done any beta testing on the Achieve platform yet? I know Selena has. Okay, you have? Perfect. Okay. Well, I hope it's going to be a lot more of you by next semester because I need folks. But essentially for the Achieve platform, it's gone through an evolution of research. So I talked to you about the phases of research that we do, and this is our research in action. So in the summer of 2017, we did discovery and development. We did those vision typing workshops. We did the instructor outreach projects where we did all of the stickies on the board and developed journeys. And then the fall of 2018, we did formative testing and usability testing. The formative testing was extremely interesting because this is where we did provide some snapshots of the product. So like 1 chapter, 1 unit, and we were able to get feedback on what was going well and what wasn't going so well. And from that, we were able to take what wasn't going well, and before it was released, start to revise it. Then we moved into a correlational study on implementation and engagement. This was a big study. It had 11 instructors and 764 students. And what we found or established was that there was a correlation between usage and engagement, which I'm going to present next. If I didn't have that correlation, I would have said, wait, stop. We can't put this product into development. Because obviously, if increased usage doesn't show increased student scores, we've got a problem. Right now, we're replicating that study in this semester, and next semester, we're going to move into a causal study. I think this is important as a publishing organization to do causal research. I think we've shied away from it for a very long time. It's uncomfortable to go to instructors and say, can you use our product with one of your classes and not use our product with another one of our classes? I mean, it's awkward, but it has to be done. It is the only way we can effectively tell you that our product is better than anything else or whatever else we're comparing ourselves against. And we have pledged to be able to do that for all of our products. So if we want to look at correlational evidence, which we have right now, we have to look at a lot of different types of data collection. So first of all, we got IRB approval from all 11 institutions, which means collecting active informed consent from every single student also that participated in the study. And then we did baseline surveys, and those are more or less descriptive. So I was able to understand who my students are, and I wanted to make sure that I represented a lot of different demographics. We did site observations. I think this is kind of unique. We actually go on site, and the purpose of that isn't so much to evaluate the instructor. The purpose of it is to understand how the instructor is using the product in an applied way. So sometimes I think in our heads we believe that we're using the product every day and we're using it a certain way, and that's how we report it. But when you go into the classroom, what you learn is that maybe you think you're using the product every day, but it's more that you're making an out-of-class assignment. You're not actually using it in the class. This helps us to authenticate what we are hearing from the instructors and their students and to understand how the product is actually being used. We also take the advantage of doing student focus groups because students are much more free to talk when they're in front of you with their peers and they feel like they are contributing to something. And so the students have been very frank with us about what they think about the product. Then we do post surveys. We pull the platform data, so we have a data point for every time a student has interacted or touched our platform, and we look at the overall course grades. It's a lot of different data. For this particular study, as I mentioned, we had not only 11 instructors and 764 students, but we also had a variety of demographics in terms of the types of institutions that participated, the types of instructors. So there were 64% who were moderately selective. We had 82% who were large institutions and 73% public. Of this, about a third of them were community colleges and 2/3 were a four-year institution. There was a lot of different instructor experience, which was important because new instructors tend to have things on their mind other than just the product that they are using. They're still learning their instructional techniques and how to manage a classroom and so forth. So we wanted to make sure we had new instructors as well as some of our more experienced instructors. There were various comfort levels with technology. What I found was interesting is that about a fourth of my my instructors were not very comfortable with technology. In fact, 2 of them had never used educational technology in their classrooms ever before this study. That was very interesting because they were experiencing problems that were more than just, I don't like something. It was genuinely, I don't even know how to incorporate technology into my classroom. And a lot of them wanted more active learning in their classroom, and I think digital platforms provide a very unique opportunity for that. From the students, 70% of our students were first-generation college goers, which, again, important. We want to make sure we're representing all students. 12% were less academically prepared to succeed, and that's based on their ACT and SAT scores, and 55% were less motivated to succeed based on a motivation scale. And what we found was that for every 10 percentage point increase in student engagement with Achieve, the students could expect to see a 5.5% increase on their final exam score. Very positive findings. So what I did was showed you the correlation between total engagement and final exam score. Total engagement in this case was defined as an instructor assigned an activity to a student and the student at least accessed it. The student didn't even have to complete the activity in this case. They literally just had to access it. So if you think about a student being assigned an e-text reading, because an example of an activity could be that they were assigned to read a passage on the book. I can't tell if they read the entire passage, obviously, by the platform data. I tried to make up metrics like they spent more than 1 minute in the passage, and when it took me time to read the passage, it took me 2 minutes, and so if they were a speed reader, they could have done it. I couldn't even do that, and so all I could tell was the student had accessed the book. Or it could be something like a student was assigned a video to watch. I can see that they opened the video. I can't guarantee that they watched the entire video, so I just had to come up with an engagement metric. Now, what was encouraging to me is, as you can see, there are a lot of students who were, for every activity assigned to them, at least attempted the activity. And that's a positive finding in and of itself. But what I also found was that there was a moderately high correlation between the final exam score and student engagement in the activity. You might not think it's that important, but from my perspective, final exam scores are not at all linked to the Achieve program itself. If I looked at overall course grade, we could argue there's multi-collinearity there, and I suspect that there is. If you look at final exam scores, all of these instructors made their own final exam. And so they weren't pulling questions from Achieve, they were questions that they had developed, and then we were able to show that because students were engaged, as they engage more, there's a higher chance that they'll do better on the exam. And when we did some predictive analysis, we found that for every 10 percentage point increase in student engagement, they can expect to see a 5.5 increase on their final exam score. To me, that's meaningful. It's educationally meaningful because it could be taking students from a passing grade to a not passing grade. We're not just talking 1 percentage point. We also wanted to look at our students who are particularly at risk. So what we were interested in is, can Achieve in particular help students who are more or less at risk for getting a D, F, or W? And what we found was that as students increased more with Achieve activities, so if they at least accessed 80% or more of the Achieve activities that were assigned to them, you can see the gap narrow between the not college ready and the college ready students. That's what we want to see. You see the gap increase if you look at the students who were accessing less than 80% of the Achieve materials. We, of course, don't want to see this, but to us, it was another nice indication that Achieve could uniquely be helping our students. And then we also looked at just the overall final exam score and final course grade by levels of implementation. Now, again, keep in mind, final course grade is going to have some grades from Achieve in there, so we always look at final exam score. But what we found was that if we categorized instructors by lightly using Achieve, so maybe they just did some e-textbook and some homework, versus instructors who did e-textbook, a pre-flexion, and homework, versus instructors who used formative assessment, summative assessment, e-textbooks, videos, we found that as you increased your implementation, your test scores increased as well. And that to us was a final indication we are on the right path. And so what we are going to do next is another research study to replicate the results, and that's happening right now. And we're doing that because you can't ever trust one study, right? If you've done one study and you find positive results, it could have been a fluke. We are replicating. We're replicating it with different instructors, with different students. We've increased the sample size. And what we hope is that we will replicate the findings, which is setting us up for a quasi-experimental study to begin in the spring. And where I like to end this presentation is with the pitch that you too could be included in a research study. The whole purpose of the quasi-experimental study is that we'll be able to look at causal inferences now. So we're actually asking instructors to look at one class using Achieve, one class using something else, and we're going to compare final exam scores for both of the classes and see which one may perform differently. We'll still be doing the site observations and the interviews so we can find out if it does work better, why? Because I think that's critically important. We don't just stop at the course grades, we try and find out why. And we look at how you implemented, because while we don't want to tell you how to implement, if you ask us, is there anything I could be doing differently to help my students? I want to be able to tell you based on data, and these studies help us do that. And if you're ever interested, number one, in finding out more about the research we do here at Macmillan, or number two, you'd like to be a participant in a future research study, we'd encourage you to reach out to us because we'd always be happy to welcome you. There are a couple folks here that have participated in research studies before. I think they could probably tell you about their experience. And we do try and make sure that your students are understanding that they have an impact by their feedback in the product development process, which I think is also critically important. So I thank you for your time, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the EconEd presentation.